before you were a dom, you did a little bit of lap dancing. Am I right in saying that? Mm-hmm. And quite recently, some legal efforts were made, governmental efforts were made to close strip clubs in Glasgow.
Yep.
And also the Highlands.
Yeah. They tried to close them all over Scotland.
And Edinburgh. People Triangle Edinburgh was under threat.
Mm-hmm.
There's also a ton in Aberdeen as well, I think, because of the oil rigs, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, so they tried to close it down. Mm. They hadn't counted on Megara Furie, had they? They weren't ready for that.
I mean, it wasn't just me.
I know. But
a whole bunch of very angry strippers. So
fuck me. Run.
So
what happened?
I guess it goes back quite a while. Like the first time that I got involved in any sort of activism was way back when Sarah Champion, the Labour MP, was trying to remove everyone's websites and have them all taken away, bring in the Nordic model, criminalise buyers and all of that stuff. If you take away the website, then you take away a screening opportunity for workers. And that would make everyone unsafe. So I decided at that point that if I was in any other workplace and I was being made unsafe, what would I do? I would unionise. The only stumbling block that I saw was that we were all self-employed. So what unions would take on self-employed workers didn't even occur to me that we're sex workers and that there might be an issue on that side of things. So that's how little of a thing that I had, like an awareness that I had that anybody might actually be annoyed at that or have a problem with it. So I put into Google self-employed unions, like who can help, and GMB was the first one that came up. So I contacted GMB via email and I got an email back and they said, I'm not too sure, but I'll come back to you with an answer on that. And then within 24 hours, I had an answer that Ria Wolfson wanted to speak to us and she was really happy to take this on. So I met up with a couple of workers that I knew who were escorts. So I was the dom and then there was other escorts there. And we went up and spoke to Ria Wolfson and she listened to us and she listened to like our concerns and how we were just concerned that we were going to get made unsafe in a job that's completely legal. What do we do? And she said, okay, we're a trade union, we'll help you. She explained a lot about trade unionism, which was, so in my mind I thought the trade union will fight it. But then I wasn't thinking, well, what does that mean? Like, what does that look like? But the trade union is actually the workers fight that themselves, but they're empowered by the union. They give them a banner to organise under, they give them clout and visibility and access to like newspapers and journalists and all of that stuff, and also a lot of direction in terms of different things. So that was what we did, and she said to me, if you want your own branch, it's going to be difficult to place you in a branch because you're self-employed, but if you want your own branch, you're going to have to recruit at least 50 members. So I came out of that meeting and I was like, easy. It was not easy. So I went out trying to recruit people to come into the branch just to start organising and looking at different things. Very quickly, we found out that the Glasgow City Council were going to try and close down strip clubs. So the Scottish Government had legislated that the licensing conditions needed to change. So the strip clubs used to be a public entertainment venue, which was the same as like a bingo hall or a pub or anything like that. And they wanted to bring in a new type of licence called a sexual entertainment venue licence. What they were trying to do though was allow to do the consultation for the councils to decide whether or not they were going to have those licences, and if they were going to have those licences, then how many licences would they make available, including setting it as 0, which effectively shuts all the clubs and bans them all. So the Scottish Government brought that in. That was really pushed in by a lady in the SNP called Sandra White, who has hated strip clubs like all of her days. And she brought in Julie Bindle to do some research on strip clubs, and a lot of it was heavily kind of biased towards men are all sleazy and these women are all exploited, and there was a whole lot of stuff in there that we were like, that's not even the setup of a club. That's not even what happens. Like, and I know that because I've been there and I've worked there. So I doubted whether or not they'd even visited a club or whether they'd just made this up. So this was all taking place. Glasgow was the first place to start the consultation, and they weren't even going to have any dancers or any trade unions or anything at the table. And it was a lady, Rhiannon Spears, who was an SNP councillor at the time, that I spoke to. And I said to her, can you please make sure that GMB, dancers, club owners, anybody that's got a vested interest in this, any of the other trade unions as well, because there are other trade unions, are involved and they're at that table, because it's them that needs to have a say on this. You know, if you were going to legislate and get rid of plumbers might have something to say about it, right? And I can't tell you what a plumber should and shouldn't be doing because I don't know anything about plumbing. Mm-hmm. So same for us, it should be the experts. So they did this consultation. Then it was like dominoes. Other cities started doing them. And I'm like, I can only take on what I can take on. So I just focused on Glasgow. I went to GMB, and that was what really drove the numbers for joining. So overnight we had like over 100 members. It was huge. And we formed a strike team, which is what you would normally do when you're doing any sort of trade union campaign. You form a strike team, which is basically a small group of people who will take decisions on behalf of the larger group. Because if you were to try and run votes for everything, it would start to get quite slow and also quite messy, and in arguments and all of that stuff. So formed a strike team of people that were happy to be in the media, and from there our whole tactic was just to have conversations with people and to bring people in and to lean into what their concerns were and answer them and get the public on side. Another thing that we decided to do very early on was to dress and look and sound and act just like everybody else. So no protests in our underwear, no shouting and bawling and megaphones and all of that stuff, because what our decision was that would other us from other people, and people would go, oh, you're a bit, don't want to help you, you don't look like me, you don't sound like me. But when people look and sound like the woman next door, or the person up the road, or you know, that your friend of a friend or your sister's pal, and suddenly they're losing their job, now you can relate to it. So by the time the consultation ended and all the results were totted up, we went in for an evidence session as well. And when we went in for the evidence session, like, that was the first time that dancers had been round a table with all of these officials. And they asked us loads of things about different things that they'd heard through the grapevine or from women's groups that were just completely untrue. Like, one women's group had went in and said, well, someone get sexually assaulted in a strip club last week and it happened here, and we were like, we're all in group chats. We would know about that.
You've heard about it, yeah.
Anything like that goes around like wildfire. There's CCTV in every single inch of every single club. You know, show me the evidence for that. That would have been reported. So there was things like that getting put about, and it's just completely untrue, and it was done so that the council would have doubts about the safety of the girls. But having the women there putting their case across was so powerful. And one of the things that I said to the council at the time was, like, you might have all the power, but we've got all the knowledge. So rather than fight each other, why don't we bring that together and actually set a gold standard, not just for Glasgow, but for the rest of Scotland and the rest of the UK. And a lot of the conditions that they wanted to bring in for safety were already happening. So I said, it's not like you're changing anything, but what you will do, because we were in support of licensing, because we thought they're going to do it anyway, so we might as well get on board with it. So we said, look, if you're going to license, all we want you to do is just take the conditions that are already happening and just set them in stone so they can't be taken away by new management or anything. Another thing that we did with that is, as a trade union, we got recognition in 2 of the clubs. So it was the first time a trade union had recognition in a club as well. So we have GMB have recognition in Seventh Heaven and also in Diamond Dolls. So even if that club changes management, we're still the trade union for in there, and we deal with any kind of disputes or anything. So that is really powerful, and it's really empowering for the women being able to unionise and bring things up like that. When it came to the last meeting where the council were going to take their vote and everything, we were allowed to sit in that meeting. And they read out the results of the consultation, and 94% of Glasgow were in favour of keeping the clubs. So I don't think they expected that. But when I heard that, I wasn't allowed to speak at the meeting, but I was like, so excited.
For listeners to the podcast and those who don't watch on YouTube, the second as you said that statistic, there is a huge smile on your face. As you say that, it's like vindication for all of that organisation, right? Yeah, and that came from having conversations. Like, we set up a table in Buchanan Street and we got people to fill out the consultation by hand. We had paper copies printed out, and we brought people over. Now, there's some people who were absolutely on board. So we're like, here's your bit of paper, fill it out, great, we'll just put that in the box. There was some people who were absolute no's. Like, they're never going to change their mind. So we were like, fair enough, like, have your opinion, that's fine. But it was mostly the people who were in the middle that we worked on. So the people that are like almost a yes, were like, well, what's stopping you from being a full yes? Like, tell us what your concerns are, and we cleared that up. And then there were people who were kind of on the border of maybe a no, and we just asked them, like, what is it that what's there for you? Like, what are you seeing in your mind that you think that this is going to be unsafe? And just ask us, have the conversation, we'll tell you anything you need to know. And there was one guy who was, it's so seedy, it's terrible, it's disgusting, these women aren't safe. And so Debbie it was that actually had a chat with him, and she was like, look, I'm the breadwinner in my house. See if I need my kids watched. My husband's taking the day off work. And she like, her whole persona and her whole way of being was just like so powerful that this guy was like, I wouldn't mess with you. And so he ended up signing and saying, like, actually, I'm a yes. Like, you do what you need to do. So.
And how often have you seen him since?
It's like regular.
I think that's what's interesting is people have these perceptions about sex workers, whether that's strippers, sex workers, dominatrixes. Mm-hmm. I think most people probably don't know someone who is. So it's like what you said, but it's about the othering, isn't it? It's like they become this phantom onto which you can project your own morality, like, or your own assumed morality of other people, being like, I assume people wouldn't treat these people with respect, or these people aren't making the decision to do it themselves. But it's like giving a voice to the people that are doing it.
Yeah, and we all do it. We all put our own judgments on our own frame of reference onto people. There's probably people that look at you guys and put their own judgments onto you, right? And
you right. Absolutely never. They're all right, though.
Do you think it's a women thing as well? Like a traditional woman thing? Because, I mean, obviously ignoring the male sex workers for one moment, but it's almost, do you know what I'm going to do? I was about to project my stereotypes. I was thinking it's like housewives at home who like are older and just don't like the idea of women having sex. But that is a real... That's my own thing. That's growing up Catholic. That is something that's brought that out of me.
I think there's a whole range of different people that agree and disagree with it. What I found really surprising was sometimes it's the people that I thought would be the last people to agree or to be on board that were actually on board. And, you know, like really older female members of my family were like, you go on, hen. And I'm like, okay, nice. And then there was people that I thought would be on board, but actually they were super prudish. And these are people who maybe are posting like their very like provocative photos and stuff on Instagram and all of this, but when you catch me anywhere near that, and it's like, wow, I thought you'd have been more in amongst this and more like supportive of that.